Let's get started. Thanks everyone for joining. So today we're going to be talking about the three phases of AI maturity in accounting. Let's get started. So just a little bit about me before we get started. My name is Armen Aklian. I'm a CPA. I'm the controller here at Kinter. I've previously worked at several SaaS startups, the last one being at ENDVR. I've also worked for larger organizations like Zendesk. Right now, I sit at the intersection of accounting and AI agents that Kinter is building. So I have a very interesting view on both the technical side, working with engineers, and my previous experience as a controller in these tech companies, right? So probably if you're watching this, you're curious, you're reading about AI, you're probably experimenting with it, and you're also wondering what's next, right? So why does this even matter? A few years ago, when we were talking about AI in accounting and finance, the question was more, can we use AI? Is it good enough? Right? Fast forward to 2026, I think it's fair to say that the experimentation phase is over. Everyone that I talked to, including myself, we're using AI. So the question really becomes, how are we using AI? Right? A lot of teams are just dabbling in it, and they're saving a few hours here and there, but the gains don't add up much across the month. And the more important thing is you want to use it in a way that compounds. So that's where the leverage is, where we're trying to, the ultimate goal is really to, for the work to leave your plate and stay gone. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about in these three distinct phases of AI maturity, right? So let's get to the main core concept, which is what are the three phases, right? As we're moving from phase one, two, and three, we're increasing autonomy for the AI. If we start with phase one, this is what I'm calling homegrown. This is where you're using ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, you're building your workflows, you're chatting with the AI, and you run them yourself. If you move over to phase two, you have what I'm calling Copilot. This is where it's a company selling a product. There's more of an onboarding ramp, and the AI actually, it's either a software that has AI infused in it, or it's built from the ground up to have AI capabilities. And the whole idea here is that it assists, but we're still doing a lot of the work. And the last phase, phase three, is when we're talking about autonomous AI, right? And at this point, this is, in my opinion, it's a new paradigm shift where now it's not so much assisting, is that the agent is actually owning the workflow end to end, and your role, our role, becomes more of being a reviewer and supervisor, right? But let's get started. Based off of what I just said, let's just take a second and think about where you or your organization is sitting at right now, right? Is it step one where we've just started dabbling in AI, we're trying some prompts in Claude? Is it more phase two where we've gone beyond just that and we've actually bought some tools that are in AI enabled that are helping us extract information faster, but we're still posting everything? Or have you actually achieved phase three, which is having fully autonomous AI agents that are owning the workflow? So this is just a quick thought exercise to think of where you sit right now as we're going through the presentation. Well, let's get started with phase one, right? So phase one, what does it look like? Well, phase one is really uh, teams, accountants, could be co-founders, they're getting started with AI, right? So this is really, you're building workflows, you're chatting with Gemini, Claude, and I keep mentioning Claude because I think as of today, Claude is probably the most popular one in finance and accounting. But this is where you're curious, you want to see what AI can do for you. You decide to code a little bit and see what kind of output it gives out. And if we go to the next slide where we look at a bit of more specific examples, here are some of the examples where we see what it actually can do, right? These are real teams. These examples here are, I've chosen three of the most popular applications. I've actually used all three myself. But when I talk to my peers and even personally, these have been the ones that are the most common and the most popular ones, starting with bank reconciliations and GL reconciliations. And this is where you get a taste of what AI can do. What you can do is essentially put in a bank statement, put in some ERP GL data, give some basic instructions to Claude, and just say, hey, can you extract the information and reconcile this using my journal entry or GLs. I can give you another example that I've personally used that really impressed me. We had a list of SaaS customer contracts extracted from our CRM. We were using HubSpot. And essentially, with just a few prompts, I asked Claude to build a deferred revenue schedule out of that, and it was able to do a pretty good job. So there's a lot of interesting usage, even at phase one. Another example that's very common is if you're able to extract some financial statements from your ERP, provide some basic instructions or assumptions, and let Claude build a full forecast file. It could be 12 months, 24 months. And it's great because you're able to customize it to say, hey, give me a best case scenario, a standard, and a worst case scenario. And it's able to do that. And you can tweak around as you talk with it. And a third example, which is something that I also see a lot, is building dashboards or summaries. Again, you're using some exports from your ERP, some spreadsheets about assumptions or headcount, and you essentially build a visually very pleasing dashboard that's presentable both for internal uses, internal leadership, or even executive summaries for the board, right? So, and there's a lot more, right? I'm just giving you the most popular ones. So how do the pros and cons work in this case? Well, it's very fast to spin up. You can have a working prototype in hours, if not days. It's very customizable because you keep chatting with the AI and you can improve on it. And you're not really having any type of vendor dependency because there are no contracts, you haven't signed anything. So you can still get a lot of use out of phase one, right? It's very impressive, especially for someone who's seeing AI for the first time. It's very interesting to see how fast and how interesting it can extract information, right? On the flip side, though, it's very fragile because it lives with the person who built it. So if I build a prompt and I decide to leave next week, someone picking that up might kind of get it, but data's change, assumptions change, and it's hard to keep that in the organization. At the same time, something that's very important in accounting is that there's usually no audit trail or controls. So when it's time to do an internal audit or an external one, it's hard to see the flow. And at the same time, there's not a lot of planning in terms of auditable write back or failure plan. If something goes wrong, you have no one else to fall back to. You have to kind of troubleshoot it yourself, right? That was phase one. Now, let's move on to phase two, where now it's getting a little bit more structured. And what we mean by that is at this point, you're probably buying a tool, you're paying for it. There's a team that's working on the tool. And what the tool does is it enhances your productivity through the use of analysis, insights, coordination, right? It surfaces anomalies. And I would say a lot of teams are probably at this stage. I would say even a combination of phase one and two, where they've started using tools, they're seeing the benefits, right? And let's go to the next slide and I'll tell you more about more specific examples. Again, these are the common ones I've seen. There's plenty of them out there, right? Close management. So there's a lot of tools right now that run the month-end checklist and surface insights from pattern detection. What that means is it's able to plug in and essentially look at everything that's happening in your ERP, propose journal entries, do some type of flux analysis, or create roll forward schedules. So it's able to do some of the work that's going to help you drive month end. At the same time, another big category here is AI enabled ERPs, and there's been an explosion of new ERPs that are entering the space, and they're shipping with AI capabilities. And I would kind of partition this into two categories where it's legacy ERPs that are infusing themselves with AI capabilities. But I think the more interesting ones are the ones that are being built ground up to be AI capable. And what that means, and I've had the opportunity to experience this firsthand, and it's very interesting because now it's a very new concept for accountants where you're able to chat with your ERP and very quickly, again, in plain English, extract information, right? So because everything is in the ERP, the AI is able to provide predictive insights, create workflow automations, all using the data that already sits in the ERP. A small side note here is the con is if you want to use an AI enabled ERP, like one of these new ones, you have to dedicate the time and the resource to actually do a full migration to it, right? So it's quite a lot of work, but you do see some benefits when you go through it. Another type that's also very common is expense tools. So there's a lot of expense tools right now, and what they do with the usage of AI is that it helps a lot with the tedious work and automatically scans and categorizes expenses, flags anything that's likely fraud. It's using a lot of pattern recognition technology infused with AI. It can do things like identify duplicates, missing bills, just a lot of the manual work gets automated through the use of AI, right? Another side note I want to put in here is that what I've seen, and I've done this myself, is even though we're using some of these tools and AI is infused in it, a lot of teams still also layer in a layer of phase one usage. So ChatGPT or it could be Claude, where you're essentially using a little bit of both to get higher productivity. And I want to be very clear when we look at the pros and cons, the pros are genuine. Like, I don't want to undersell it. There's a lot of use here, right? There's real time savings. There's a lower risk of adoptions because you're working with vendors that include support. And I think this is big, especially for people who are not as comfortable with new technology, because in phase one, you have no one helping you. It's just you and the AI, versus over here, you have a support team. Depending on the product, you'll have maybe a success manager or someone that will hold your hand and give you a good on ramping experience as you're learning the tool, right? And also, a lot of these tools are established products that are mature and that are now having enhanced capabilities, right? So there's a lot of great stuff here. The honest con, though, is you're adding a layer and not necessarily a new model, right? The bottleneck is still that it is going to provide more insight. It's going to flag things for you, but you're still doing the work. It doesn't replace the work. It's orchestrating it, it's monitoring it, but it's not necessarily taking it completely off your plate, right? For the last point, this is something that I've experienced and I've heard a lot of people say as well, is sometimes the idea of the product looks very exciting and you can imagine yourself saving a lot of time or money. But at the end of the day, as you actually go through the steps in real life, you realize that yes, you've gained 8 hours of productivity using the tool, but because of some limitation, you're also having to spend 2 3 hours extra to overcome that. So the net is actually, I've noticed this myself, the net is actually less than what you would have imagined. So that's something also to keep in mind. One point I want to focus on is what I'm calling this copilot trap, which is when you start using these tools that are a bit more advanced, you have to understand that like they're orchestrating the work, they watch the work, they monitor, they flag things, but they're not replacing the work. Like you're still doing a lot of the work. They might automate a portion of it, but a lot of it still relies on us, right? So you're not really changing the model, you're just adding a layer on it. And let me drive that home by talking about phase three, which is the autonomous phase. Okay. And what does that look like? So, in this, we want to think about a bit of a paradigm shift where imagine the AI agent is your assistant and it owns the workflow from end to end, right? So, we're not only talking about analysis, we're not only talking about throwing in some flags. We're talking about the whole thing, right? Just assume you have an assistant. What happens in that case is if you're able to train and trust that assistant, your role steps back and becomes more of a supervising role. So you're kind of just reviewing and making sure things are going well, right? And who's here? Well, right now there's a very small group of early movers, but that's growing fast. And you need to make sure that you're choosing the right product here because it's you need to put in a lot of trust into it. Okay. And what does this look like in practice? Well, if you look at the top side of the slide, this is something that I'm sure everyone sympathizes here, which is when you're doing month end, uh, usually what happens is the month passes by, it's the first of the month, and you have like 20 items that you need to do, scramble to get it all done. And to be fair, I'm sure that you can maybe do 5 of them during the month. You still have 15 left at the end of the month to take care of. And it's a scramble. There's a lot of manual processes and the risk of error is high. How that changes completely in a phase 3 setup, you have all these agents that are running 24/7 every day and that are doing the work as the month goes by. So we're talking about a continuous close process where it could be prepaids, it could be accruals, payroll, J's, recon. It's doing it every day so that by the time close comes, yeah, maybe it's not doing 100% of it, but you're doing 90 plus percent by the time day one comes. You're only left with 10% left, right? And that's the goal, which is getting these agents to work 24/7. You're just sitting back and doing more of a supervisory and review role, and obviously making all the judgment calls for the items that require the judgment layer. So you might say, okay, well, what are the pros and cons in phase 3? Well, I think the biggest pro in all this presentation is that you're not accelerating the process. You're not saying, hey, I'm doing my work faster. The whole model changes because now the agent is taking everything off your plate. You're not saving time, you're removing the task completely from your plate, right? And so what ends up happening is your role and your team's role shifts to being more of a review and supervision role. And what that allows you to do is essentially focus your time to higher value work versus that manual close grind and getting caught up in more of the menial and manual tasks that we would do in the past, right? That's great. But at the same time, there are some cons to talk about, which is you need to require real trust. Okay. You're letting the system do the analysis, do the posting automatically in your ERP, and that system needs to earn your trust. One thing I want to mention here is being an accountant, you know that it's very hard to let go of these things. So there's a certain level of feeling comfortable to let go. But at the same time, what we're doing here is we also understand that there's materiality thresholds to everything, right? And an interesting concept is to actually set a threshold of automation, which is to say, hey, any posting, let's say below $5,000, post automatically and I'll review later if I want to. I trust you for that. But you can always maintain control to say, hey, anything above 5,000 or anything that hits this GL, uh, I don't want you to post automatically. You can suggest it, but I want to take a look first and make a judgment call on it. So you're still maintaining a lot of control, but you can tweak that control to automate a lot of things that you wouldn't want to do manually, right? Again, vendor choice matters because this is a very advanced system. And at the same time, one thing that we're especially focusing on is auditability. A lot of times, especially when you're reaching to this level where the agent is posting things, you want to make sure that you have a very clear audit trail, both internally and if you get externally audited, to see very clearly, hey, the agent created this journal entry, went back and edited it, and you kind of have that flow readily available, which I think is very important for something as autonomous as this one. And if I go back and I look at the progression, um, It's not necessarily about jumping straight to phase three, right? We're not saying phase three is the best or one is fine. It's really understanding based off of all the information we talked about, where do you sit right now, right? And it's okay to experiment in phase one until you build comfort to move to phase two, or from phase two to phase three. uh, the thing is that as AI improves and as the tools improve, phase three will be providing the most value. So it's okay to stay in phase one and two as you're building up trust and understanding of the products. But our point of view is that you eventually want to move to a phase three level product, because if everyone else does it and you don't, you are going to be left behind. And that's something you want to avoid. Now, we've talked through phase one, two, and three. I want you to think about a few questions to see which phase you're in, and just make you think a little bit about future phases as well, right? So, question number one: where is the most manual time going on your team today? And what I would add to that is, which AI tools could you use to make that either better or make it go away, right? Question number two: what would you need to trust an AI to post an entry? Would you be more comfortable if there's thresholds you can set? Would you be more comfortable if there's a way you can customize the AI to your needs, right? And question number three is, what would you do with the time if reconciliations just got done, right? And I just put in reconciliations, but it could be any of those manual tasks that are taking your time. And ponder about these questions, but the answers to these questions kind of point to the phase you're ready for next, right? Something very interesting to think about. That being said, what I want to leave you with is that at Kinter, we're fully focused on building phase three AI agents. And we'd love to show you what that looks like in practice. What we'll do is we'll put a link in the chat if you want to book a demo and see what phase three looks like. It's a very exciting time right now, and we're building really exciting products. I'm really excited for this. Thank you so much for joining this call, and I hope you have a wonderful day.